Welcome, everyone. This is a load management dialogue presented by PLMA. Here you'll discover practitioner perspectives on flexible load management, demand response, and distributed energy resources. Today's session is a discussion of a new product category in the EV charging arena. I want to thank the PLMA's Electric Transportation Interest Group for bringing forward this interesting topic and the panelists. And now let's turn today's presentation over to Megan Jennings of Rappahannock Electric Cooperative and a co-chair of the Electric Transportation Interest Group, so we can get this conversation started.
Thanks, Rich. Welcome, everyone. I'm Megan, like Rich mentioned, and I'm happy to be here today on behalf of the Electric Transportation Interest Group with PLMA. We are made up of 4 co-chairs here, myself, Katie Parkinson, Kessie, and Stacy Noblet. A little bit about us. We are all about providing webinars and in-person conference sessions with all about electric transportation. And we do these webinars throughout the year. We're excited for our Indianapolis conference coming up just in a couple of short weeks. Next slide, please, Rich. Please come see us. It's on Monday, May 11th from 1:15 to 2:45. All 4 of us will be there having an exciting discussion about the current state of electric transportation today in an uncertain market. And with that, I'm going to kind of move through and pass it over to Tyler.
Thanks, Megan. Can you hear me okay? Great. Wonderful. Well, thanks for coming. I just wanted to provide a quick introduction for myself. We'll introduce the panelists, and then we'll go through a brief presentation and just get it back so that way the panelists can have a lively discussion around this topic, and then we'll open it up for you all. So just as a background, some of you may remember me from working with Flex Charging, which ended up becoming Flex Energy. I was on the board there where we were working on the demand side management of EV charging, where we worked with some of the utilities here. Before that, I spent nearly a decade building and launching products focused on supporting fleets and personally doing some advising and consulting for large fleets doing electrification plans. Since then, since joining OptiGrid and taking over operations of it about a year ago, we've launched 2 products. We launched a DC-DC converter called Flow that was inserted inside of a major OEM's trucks, Orange EV, which happens to be on the call today, to take their low voltage truck and make it interoperable with CCS1 charging, which also increased their ability to rapidly charge the truck. And then the second product, which I'm here to talk about today, is our DC fast charger, our battery integrated charger called Reservoir, which I'm looking forward to sharing more about. With that, I'll throw it off to Anurag for his introduction. There he is.
Thank you, Tyler. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Great. Hello, everyone. I'm Anurag, and it's my pleasure to be here with Peak Load Management Alliance. I started my career working at Michigan Technology University, BMW, and then Oak Ridge National Lab on battery systems, and have founded Electric Fish. We are a very small mission-driven team working on a completely new kind of electrical infrastructure, which envisions that energy storage on the grid should be distributed. And we are tackling the first problem of deploying very fast public charging infrastructure. It's a very difficult load to manage, and the load management on the electric grid, or the flow of electrons, is kind of unidirectional still. So our goal is to deploy these big energy storage systems with very fast charging at local electrical grid so that we can fundamentally change how electrical grid works today. And more to come in the talk today.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, Mark, you are up.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Mark Purcell, Senior Corporate Development and Strategy Manager at Orange EV. If you're not familiar with who Orange EV is, we are a 100% electric truck manufacturer. We make Class 8. There's a lot of names for them. Yard dogs, yard goats, mules, yard dogs, hostlers, terminal tractors. We make them in Kansas City, Kansas. And essentially my role in a nutshell is to eliminate barriers of entry for electrification through partnerships, interoperability, special projects, all of that falls under me. But the goal is to electrify as many sites as possible so we can get rid of those diesels. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. And Alan, please join us.
Morning, everybody. Alan Bates. I am a product specialist with Portland General Electric. We are an investor-owned utility in the Northwest, serving about 950,000 customers, and a lot of those in the Portland metro area. I work on infrastructure programs, so I've been working on business and multifamily make-ready programs, as well as some new programs that I'll talk more about later, but working on a specific one that relates to this topic is charging resiliency hubs. So I'll get a little bit more into that, but my background is in electrification, electric vehicles. Been doing in and around this world for about 15, 16 years, and lots changing all the time, and so excited to talk about this topic.
Wonderful. Well, now that you know who we are, let's talk briefly about the kind of innovation that we're all centered around. So what's driving this innovation is a bit directly related to what you all are focused on as well, which is electric vehicles and equipment have started charging during peak load times. You can go to the next slide. So a lot of times there's a look at this through the lens of, when can we control when the charging happens? But it's difficult to do that. So directly controlling the charging is difficult for fleets because they have to operate the vehicles when they have to operate the vehicles, and their charge windows are usually overnight, but they also occur on opportunity charging that happen to run directly when everyone is dealing with peak load. Public charging needs to be available on demand. There's no way to get around that. And then delays in the equipment needed, but also the upgraded power create a lot of issues there. So it's very difficult to manage the charging. I found this out at Flex Charging myself. Next slide. The other approach to solving this kind of big demand spike is on doing on-site storage to buffer the charging. The issues are there's major upfront costs. There's huge delays. If anybody has been on the site development side of this, like Mark has, the downtime to the business operations is sometimes a non-starter. The capital expenditure, yeah, you're getting rid of a diesel truck, but now you're having to deal with all this infrastructure build out, and then the delays in just getting the equipment they need. So, next slide. The approach that we're talking about today is battery integrated charging. Now, at its basic, which there's different flavors of it, me and Anurag have slightly different approaches, is the goal is to reduce the time to deploy fast charging when there's limited power, or reduce the time to develop this big BESS system and reduce the expense. Because every day that you're running diesel versus electric, or you're running gas versus electric, you're wasting money. Battery integrated chargers do this by putting the battery storage that a BESS would have and the DC fast charger together inside of one certified unit that is AC in and DC out. So it has lots of big value in there of not having all the conversion. This enables rapid deployment. So these can be shipped on the back of a truck, wired into the available power there, or with minimal upgrades to the site. Next slide. And how it works is it steadily draws. So it doesn't have these huge spikes that DC fast chargers have. It steadily draws, and in the right situations can stop drawing electricity from the grid in those peak windows. And with the right setup, it can push energy back to the facility and possibly the grid to really kind of further offset that facility's energy needs and remove it from the peak load. Next. And this is just a glimpse of what it looks like through the lens of 50 kW rather than 200 kW, or 80 amps or 60 amps as opposed to 300 amps that a DC fast charger needs to put 200 kW out. We're already seeing this have massive impacts on lowering demand charges, which is what peak load turns into if you're a facility, but also the time of use rates. And so with that, I think that's enough primer. We can get into the questions, and let's go.
Great. Thank you, Tyler. I just kind of also want to let the audience know that we're going to run through some questions, discussion points with our panelists today. But if at any point you have any questions, please feel free to submit them through the chat, and we'll be sure to get to them after we chat with our panelists for a little bit. So my first question is going to be for you, Anurag. Where do battery integrated chargers make the most sense and where don't they?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the simple answer is wherever the cost of upgrades for the electrical grid or the missed opportunity of bringing EV charging is much, much higher than the cost of the integrated battery pack, then it makes sense. So the examples would be highly grid constrained sites. First, where the capacity is tapped out, upgrades are going to take years, storage can get going really quickly. Second is also highly rural or sparse locations where extending infrastructure, again, is going to be prohibitively expensive to bring that kind of high power there. And then something which is relevant for this group is wherever there is high volatility in the electrical grid. So high solar penetration, where there's a lot of variable load, a data center in your neighborhood, anything which is causing a lot of variability. That is where this can just basically solve the problem with the electrical grid by the bidirectional energy. Where it doesn't make sense, again, to complete my answer, is where the grid is already overbuilt. Capacity is abundant, and then also where utilization is consistently very high. So if there is only one charger within the next 100 miles or something, and the utilization is going to be 90, 100%, not always the case, or very few times it's the case, that is when the battery storage will not be able to sustain those kind of like continuous utilization. So that won't be a right fit for it.
That's great.
Great.
This is the time when the other panelists can add too, Mark and Alan, if you like. I can add one more. When we were looking in dense older cities like Boston, New York, Philadelphia, where they're running on 208 and they have limited power, to add more power is almost impossible. So if you're trying to build any charging infrastructure, which is a mandate for a lot of these cities, you have to be able to plug into whatever's left in the panel, and sometimes it's 50 amps, 40 amps, and there's no way you're doing DC fast charging against that. So you have to have a battery in the loop. And the larger the footprint, which a BESS and a transformer and anything else you would do to do this is just impossible because there's no real estate available, and what's available is extremely expensive. So that's another use case that we've seen. 100-year-old buildings, you're not dropping a bunch more load into there.
Yeah, I can add on it as well. Anurag, you nailed it on the head with, grid constraints from the fleet perspective. One of the major challenges we have is we allow all of our customers to demo the truck to make sure it's a good fit for them. One of the challenges is, well, I don't have power. I've been running diesels and I have this much. And with a traditional DC fast charger, we can't complete a demo because we're telling them, well, in order for us to deliver a charger for you, you've got to upgrade, and that could be 50 grand, 100 grand, we don't know. And then the deal's done just that easily. So one of the advantages with a battery integrated charger is they can hook up to very, very little amounts of power. They can hook up to different types of power. If you have 208, 240, you don't have 480. Traditional DC fast chargers, you need 480. And like Tyler mentioned, you typically need quite a bit of juice there in order to hook those up. If you don't have it, we're stuck. So that can delay or stop a demo, let alone a sale, pretty easily. Where it doesn't make sense, what we found from the fleet side is if your shift operations are very easy, meaning you need one warehouse truck and a 25 kilowatt charger is plenty because you're running one shift, you can charge for 10 hours overnight. Getting something like Anurag's or Tyler's products is going to be a bit of overkill and not entirely necessary. So that's one example. I'll get into more later on during my section, but that in a nutshell is from our viewpoint, a couple of examples, what is a good fit and what's not.
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Mark. Alan, to add a little bit flavor from the utility side, could we talk a little bit about what's driving these grid constraints and delays today?
Yeah, I think we're not alone, but PGE, we're seeing obviously a lot of data center explosion. I guess that's not a good term, but we're seeing a lot of data center activity. And so, that's where the new load is going towards. And then we're seeing, right, a lot of fleet adoption as well. So with current diesel prices, we're seeing a lot of uptake of medium and heavy. And we're also getting requests from, larger charging depots, charge point operators to put in new load. And so it's coming kind of for transportation. We're getting, the fleet side, and we're getting the data center side. So that's really where a lot of the constraints are happening. And then you also just have outdated, wires and things and substations and things that need to be upgraded. So it's just a perfect storm of things that need to happen. And when you've got customers that are saying, hey, we need to get, power to this area, we have to plan quickly for that and strategize how we're going to do that. And that's the trade-off between, trying to do something proactively versus reactively. And I think that's where batteries can help, buffer that.
Great. Well, let's touch base with Mark a little bit more about from the fleet operator perspective. Could you kind of shed some light on what are these biggest constraints that you face in electrification?
Absolutely. Historically speaking, as a company, when we started 13 years ago, our typical customer was one truck and one charger at a warehouse. Fleet sizes are growing. We've now got 5 customers that have over 100 trucks. We are expanding into port operations, rail operations. These fleets are getting very, very large. And, you heard me touch a little bit about the power upgrades. When we complete a successful demo, one of the biggest frustrations from our standpoint is, hey, great, I want to buy 10 trucks. Okay, awesome. Do you have the power? No, we don't. Oh boy. All right. Well, one of the things that we've been doing recently is I've spent the last couple of years signing on some infrastructure partners that can help us with, basically hold the customer's hand on the design work, the construction, procurement, installation, commissioning, things of that nature. From our standpoint, we just want to be able to deliver trucks and help our customers save money. So when we look at it from that standpoint, let's say it's a site that needs 10 200 kilowatt DC fast chargers. When we look at the project as a whole, there's 2 major issues with going with traditional DC fast chargers. Number one, if we can get away with charging overnight, our trucks in most operations can run 2 full shifts without having to charge the batteries. We always encourage, if you can opportunity charge on breaks during shift changes, please do so, but it's not always possible. If you can get away with that and your grid can support it, it's typically not an issue. We can deploy very quickly. But if you don't have the appropriate power, we've seen delays 4 or 5 years with some customers before they can get the appropriate power. And for us, that means we can't sell them trucks when we'd like to. And for the customer, that means they're wasting money. So our TCO is very, very robust when we compare the price of our truck versus the price of a diesel. We can typically, in most cases, make up the extra money for the EV in 2 years or less. And then from then on out, it's money in your pocket. When you look at, from the diesel standpoint, just fuel and maintenance alone, it's such a waste of money. And like Tyler mentioned earlier on in the call, when you go electric, your operations save more money than you can possibly imagine. Now, kind of shifting gears a little bit, we have deployed at sites. Here's another important thing to understand. When you deploy very large DC fast chargers and you have your whole fleet coming in at 3 p.m. to charge at once, whoop, you get this massive spike. Okay. Now, this is a learning we've had as a company over the years with these big fleets. When you have that spike, there's certain utilities that will charge you your entire monthly bill based on that spike. So then I get a phone call, hey, Mark, you told me I was going to save all this money in my operation. What's going on here? I just got my power bill. And then you have to have that conversation of, well, can you avoid charging during the day? Well, no, I can't. I can't slow down. I've got to do it at this time because my shifts won't allow me to wait until 6 o'clock at night. Well, that's one of the beautiful things about these battery integrated chargers is it's basically a garden hose in from the grid and a fire hose out. So when my trucks pull up at 3 p.m., these chargers have been trickle charging at a very low rate from the grid and filling the batteries up. When my trucks pull in, they're pulling a lot of juice from the batteries, but the grid's not effective, meaning your utility bills are going to be much lower. And we can adjust those shift schedules. We can adjust the chargers accordingly to accommodate a lot of fleet sizes. So from my standpoint, the ability to be able to pull less from the grid at peak times is going to save our customers a ton of money.
That's great. Yeah, there's a good example in your backyard, Alan. The Portland International Airport, they deployed a good group of DC fast chargers, and their budget for energy is 300% higher than expected.
Mm-hmm.
And for any of these public-private entities that can't just pull on public funds or can't pull on those to like change what their operational cost is, they would rather have all the upfront costs of a BESS or any of that stuff. But sometimes they're already halfway into the project and they need to figure out a solution. So for folks like me and Anurag, we can ship them inventory and have it up and running within a day. So, well, if we have inventory, that's a whole nother issue with tariffs and battery costs and stuff, but it means that they don't have to run their operation for another 3, 6, 9 months while they do engineering surveys, why they get permitting, why they tear up a publicly used area. I mean, it's just the planning ahead is being missed, and those demand charges aren't being accounted in the TCO. And once you add those in, it changes things.
Yeah, and I'll go a little bit deeper here too, everybody. One of the other advantages of doing a battery integrated charger is the timing. So you heard me talk about the lead times for adding power. When we have sites that, have a decent amount of power and you've got a pretty large operation, but you don't have a ton of power, an example is, we deployed a site, a few months ago that needed 30 chargers, and we were only able to accommodate 10 trucks, and we were going to have to wait 3 years to deploy the other 20. Well, for the customer, they're really frustrated because they see our TCO on the truck side and how much money they save. So the quicker we can deploy, the better it is for us, the better it is for the customer, and they can see those immediate savings the faster that we go. When they have to wait years, they understand now, man, I'm just wasting money on these diesels, and not to mention the fuel and the maintenance. But I've spoken to a few customers that have been running diesels for years, and their goal uptime, the goal, not what they're actually getting on uptime for their diesel trucks, is 80%. If their diesels are running 80% of the time, they're happy. And a lot of these outfits are buying extra trucks as backups because they understand that those vehicles are going to be down. Our trucks run at 98%. So our trucks are running 98% of the time. So it's not just the fuel and the maintenance cost, it's the efficiency, it's the fact that you're not going to have equipment down and unused, and you've got, $100,000 of inventory in each trailer sitting idle and you can't move it because your trucks aren't working. So that's another key piece. And with a battery integrated charger, we can show up, okay, how much power do you have? And one of the reasons we do demos is we let the customers use it for a week, a month, And we say, hey, drive these trucks as hard as you can so we can pull the data and we can help you. And a lot of customers, they're like, oh, Mark, I need 20 400 kilowatt chargers. And we do the demo, like, no, you don't. You absolutely do not need that much. Based on how you use the vehicles, you can actually get away with this size charger and you don't need as many. So customers thrilled. We're not going to try to oversell them. They don't need as much as they think we do. And we say, well, actually, if you've got 40 amps at each parking spot, we can give you a 200 kilowatt charger that's going to trickle charge from the grid. So it's going to act like a small charger pulling from the grid, but it's going to give you the performance of a large charger when the trucks pull up to charge. So again, it's one of those things that if I deploy 200 kilowatt chargers, I need 400 amps at each parking spot. And that's a lot of power. And if you don't have it, you have two options. You can either deploy a battery integrated charger and we can get you up and running quickly, or you're going to have to wait years and spend a lot of money on the infrastructure.
I'll share another use case for this technology. So I kind of teased it a little bit when I introduced myself, but we're working on charging resiliency hubs. So this is effectively it's BESS plus solar plus fast charging deployed in areas that could be grid constrained or could be in high-risk fire zones or PSPS zones, basically in areas where there's not a lot of power, but their backup power may be necessary because of outages either due to a utility shut off or due to weather. So we're currently scoping a project where we're going to demonstrate this technology either with battery integrated chargers or just a complete BESS system incorporated with a solar canopy that will allow a fast charging hub to exist. So normal, just, you imagine, your regular sort of public fast charging site, but this site has backup, right? So if power goes out, people can go and still get power for a certain amount of time. Power will be portioned out so that, that we can get the maximum number of people in that area, right, to get some power, then to get to another zone where they can get, more power. So I guess it's just another use case, but in our case, the hope is that 99% of the life of, this hub is just a fast charging hub, but when the power goes out, it's there and it has that backup power. The other benefit to this is the charge point operator can do some energy arbitrage, time of use. Like Mark was saying, you can basically charge off peak and then be able to, power those chargers, during peak essentially for the lower cost energy. So we're currently designing that, and eventually we'll have sort of a white paper on that as well. But being that we're in the West and in the Northwest, fire danger is high and it's becoming higher. So we're really now looking at that as a viable technology.
Guys, I'd love to ask a question to both Mark and Alan here, just on the cost of electricity, right? I would say there are two trends. First, the cost of just diesel that's kind of going up right now. I don't know if it's short or long term, but that will be trending up, right? And second is the cost of electricity, how it's constructed, the demand charges, which Mark, you talked about, they are going to keep going up as well, right? So Alan, first, what do you think about the cost of electricity going up, or how did it trend, and how would the demand charges trend? And then Mark, how do you think the ROI is changing with the cost of diesel?
Yeah, I mean, we're not quite as affected by demand charges in our territory. Certainly they are. There's a factor there, and obviously you could bake that into the calculation. We're not quite as affected by as much as California and some other states are. But yes, they are going up. All energy prices are going up because of the cost of maintenance, of adding in renewables, of upgrading the grid, of doing all the things that we have to do, of data centers. And so, in general, the trend is up. And I think batteries, for a lot of reasons, for the reasons we're talking about now, eventually, right, the vehicles themselves and the batteries that possibly power them become dispatchable, energy as well, right? So virtual power plants. So PGE specifically, we've got a pretty high level of VPP now. And so I see, this is my opinion, not PGE opinion, but is that eventually a lot of these batteries really become part of our network. And we are already seeing that at grid scale, but even small batteries and even with chargers and smaller BESS eventually become part of that.
That was kind of my plug here, right? I think because of the cost of electricity and how exactly battery become a structure, like a big structure of the cost of energy, we are just like trending in that direction. Basically, batteries are just a part of the infrastructure itself. So thinking just apples to apples about the upfront cost of batteries coming from just direct ROI of just the fleet use it's not the full picture. The electrical grid basically, or the utilities, are going to subsidize that either directly through tariffs, demand charges, or any other mechanisms which is still to be built.
Yeah, and I think also just, I'm not plugging anybody specifically, but I think, second life batteries will also become a piece of this, because, I think people that don't understand this technology, or that, are maybe a little afraid of change, everybody kind of says, well, what are you going to do with the batteries? And how, aren't you creating more problems by all these batteries, right? And there are some pretty good technologies and companies out there working on second life. And so I think that's a factor in this too, that we'll see when these things are constructed, that there will be sort of this ecosystem that will be created. So I think that people are proactively addressing that, and we as a utility are looking at that too.
I guess we can kind of switch gears here, throwing it back to Tyler a little bit more about these chargers themselves, or ANRAG. Can we talk a little bit about, I'm sure people are wondering, like, this sounds like a great solution to our grid constraint issues, but what about the battery degradation and life cycle of these products? What are we seeing there? What are our thoughts behind that? And then also, as a secondary question, sorry, is how do the installation and operation and maintenance of these chargers kind of differ from just a normal EV charger?
Yeah, I can take the first crack at it, ANRAG. Yeah, degradation is a good question, and it has to do with how rapidly it's discharging. So what's the C rate? But it also has to do with the battery chemistry and how closely you hold it to where it's comfortable. So from before I took over the company, we already started switching over to LFP, which is a much better thermal profile. And in most situations, our battery integrated chargers do not require liquid cooling. We're using air cooling to keep it within that range, which means that the chances of failure are low. And the whole point of it was to remove as much failure points as possible, because as Mark pointed out, downtime is the killer. So it's not about how much you can put out, it's about how long you can do it uninterrupted. And then if you do have an interruption, if there is an event, how quickly can you get it back up? So for the last 2 years, OptiGrid's been redesigning around serviceability and manufacturability, because if something goes wrong, we want to be able to replace it in modular. What we're seeing in market, so Mark's trucks are actually running on LFP. There are trucks that are 10 years old that still have above 70% state of charge. They're still very resilient. They even got trucks that are falling apart. They're rusting through, but the batteries are still actually working pretty well. So I think there is a first life that's a lot longer than people I think, and that if you make them correctly, which I'm sure ANRAG is doing as well, you can swap batteries. The battery packs are modular, the systems are modular, and if you do it right, there's not a lot of moving parts in there. So the lifespan of the actual battery integrated charger because it's not a bunch of different components by a bunch of different makers spread out across a site that has exposure and it's got conversion. There's not as many breaks in the chain if it's all inside of one unit. It's all certified, which is great. And it's all going AC in and DC out. You don't have all those conversion and issues. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that too. That's a good point. One of the number one questions we get when we are electrifying new sites, and our customers have been running diesels for decades, is the biggest concern is, well, how long are the batteries going to last? Because they're not cheap, right? Let's be honest here. They are not cheap. And so the short answer is we don't know. We keep increasing our battery warranty because they just keep lasting longer and longer. And our oldest truck was deployed in Chicago over a decade ago, and it's still on its original battery. So the short answer is to customers, I'm sorry, I wish I could tell you, but we don't know because our oldest vehicle is still running perfectly. These things are built really, really well. And, it's the same thing when folks buy, electric cars. That's the biggest concern. Well, how long is this thing going to run? But, to Tyler's point, they're very modular. If you do have a cell go bad, we can swap it very, very easily. And it's not a big deal. But yeah, these short answers, we have no idea, which is a good thing. Ask me again in another 10 years and I'll have better data for you.
Yeah, I think it's already covered. Tyler already said that type of chemistry and how you're managing the batteries, really, that's what really matters. The type of cooling, that's something to be contested. But yes, liquid cooling definitely requires more frequent checkpoints, predictive maintenance, and that will also elongate how long the asset can last. So what we have learned from the field is that you should definitely think about OpEx right in the front as well, as compared to just like trying to move the product and not budgeting or not letting the customer know about what exactly the operation costs are going to be. And as long as you're keeping the batteries happy, they're going to last much longer. Mark already said like 15 years is 10 to 15 years before they have to be replaced is the ballpark, basically. Yeah.
I don't want to get us off topic here, but I think the other thing, which I don't fully know yet, and I maybe you guys do, is solid state, how solid state battery technology will impact the work that you're doing, the products you're building, and obviously some of the major automakers are talking about it. They're testing things. I think they have some maybe models that are in vehicles now. But yeah, I'm curious if there's any Anurag or Tyler, if there's any contemplation of solid state in the batteries that you're working with.
I can start having a battery researcher. That's what I worked on, and I personally feel very excited about solid state, as well as other technologies like sodium ion, because they are getting commercialized. I personally am agnostic to the battery chemistry as long as it fits in our form factor, right? We are not building cells, at least not yet, until we're getting to like a phase scale. Yes, whatever technology is commercialized, available, and they're gonna have those number of cycles, and they fit in that form factor in our system and replaceability, as Tyler and Mark have mentioned, then open to play with that, right? I would say one good thing to look forward for solid state and sodium ion batteries is the inherent safety. Lithium iron phosphate is definitely pretty safe. It produces CO2 when it burns, so it's a safer chemistry than the other ones. But sodium ion and like solid state, the biggest promise is that they are not going to be able to catch on fire. To go on another tirade here, a lot of standards need to change. The big thing is the UL 9540 about safety of batteries, right? And the standard needs to be changed in a way that it can accept batteries which just cannot catch on fire, right? So, that's the biggest promise in these kind of chemistries. Basically, the new chemistries that they will be inherently safer. Yeah.
One thing to add is that when we're looking at battery chemistry or battery technology, yeah, making it modular, like Anurag said, as long as it's the size that fits, because like sodium ion is about half as energy dense. So with the same footprint, you're going to need twice as many batteries, which doesn't make sense if you got a box that you got to fit everything in. But the other part that's kind of sodium ion and any other battery chemistry, including solid state, is onshore, near shore. If we can break away from supply chains that are 100% held up in China or anywhere offshore, that is also a nice promise. That's part of the reason why I like sodium ion and why the military is getting so much behind it. There's local companies like Column and stuff going after this. Is it not having the dependency externally? Even if it's South America, it's way better to have it near shore than completely offshore, especially as, I mean, we've seen how much interesting and spicy things are happening on the global politics. So that's the other part, but it has to be non-cost prohibitive. And right now, wound or spun cells coming out of China are still the best price, bang for their buck.
Great. Well, I think that now is maybe a good time that we switch over to some audience questions. I see that there's some come through the chat. Please keep them coming in if anyone has any questions. We'll just start off with Daniel's first question, which I might need you to expand on, Daniel, but are you seeing this as a resource focused on primary depot capacity build out or a bridge depot, connector sites for longer haul vehicles to defray the cost of secondary site build outs necessary to expand range of service?
I don't quite understand the question. If someone else wants to take a crack at it, maybe I can understand it through their answer.
It sounds like to me, is he asking, is this a temporary solution, basically a bridge to permanent infrastructure? That's how I'm reading it. So I'll kind of take a crack at it here. So from the fleet standpoint, we have several sites that and I did, this is a nice transition because I did want to circle back to something that Alan had said about the future of battery backup. I sat through a couple of panels at a recent charging conference and wanted to pull my hair out because these companies were telling customers, hey, if you can't upgrade your power, here's a great solution. We're going to sell you this trailer that runs on diesel or natural gas, and you can run your chargers that way. They failed to mention, number one, that kind of defeats the freaking purpose, in my opinion, of lowering emissions. Like, oh, you want to run your charger on a diesel generator? That's a great idea. Secondly, not to offend anybody here, I feel very strongly about this, so I apologize if my passion is getting away from me here, but I've been down this rabbit hole many times. The other side of that is we've had customers actually deploy, natural gas trailers and buy hydrogen equipment, and then their hydrogen provider goes out of business, and now they've got vehicles sitting idle. They also don't mention the cost to run those things. It's a fortune. It's more than the vehicle's cost. So for me, in my opinion, the long and the short of it is, it's the same reason when we run into sites that have union labor constraints where the driver cannot plug in the vehicle. What do? I've looked at inductive, I've looked at robotic arms. In my opinion, the charger should never cost more than the vehicle. That is a hill I will die on. And when customers look at me funny, I hold up my iPhone. I'm like, would you rather pay more for this or your charging cord? What makes more sense? This is the tool, all right? This is the accessory. So when you explain it that way, it makes a lot of sense. But when we're talking about running your equipment and the equipment needed to charge the vehicles, if that's more expensive, the TCO is just shot. It doesn't make sense anymore. So for me, in the United States anyway, we are electrifying faster than the utilities can keep up. This will continue being a problem, which, to Alan's point, that's why battery backup is not going anywhere. It's going to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow because we need it. And then that's also, an exciting thing from a fleet perspective is, Well, I've got customer spending $500,000 a piece on these, these charging trailers. I can go into a site that has very little amounts of power and we can deploy a battery integrated charger for a fraction of the cost. They can rent it, they can buy it. There's a lot of opportunities there, but I see it as both a permanent solution and a temporary solution. So if you have a site that's running 3 shifts and you're just running the heck out of these things, and you need a ton of power and you understand what your power bills are going to do and you're okay with it because you understand how much money you're spending or saving on the vehicle side of things versus a diesel, we can deploy something like an Electric Fish or an OptiGrid solution temporarily, and now you can run 2 shifts. You're still saving money. You can start electrifying as you ramp up, as you build out the infrastructure. You can absolutely do that. But I don't see it as a direct replacement. I see it as a complement. We've got sites where part of the yard is heavily utilized and part of the yard is not. So there's really a lot of ways, which is why we want to be involved on the front end with the customers so we can help them based on their shift operations make the best choice possible. But I'm taking up too much time here, but long story short, it's a nice bridge, but it's also a nice permanent solution. It just depends on the site.
That's great.
I'm gonna knock out one question here from Katie. Can battery integrated chargers be integrated with V2G? So from a utility perspective, what I've heard and what we're sort of in our current demonstration, they have to, in order for it to be a grid, I guess, capable V2G situation, it has to be of a certain size to make sense, right? So because if it's just too small, it's not the interconnection and the way that it's set up is not, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. So I don't know, what Tyler and Anurag have run into as far as, V2G, but at least with PGE, the size of like, if we're talking about like this resiliency hub that I've been talking about, those smaller BESS don't make sense necessarily with V2G. It does make sense for peak shaving and time of use and some of those benefits, but from a grid bidirectional perspective, we're not going to be pulling dispatchable power from that battery on a regular basis. It's just not, it's too small.
I'll take a crack at it and then you can go, Anurag, because I know you want to say a lot here. Yeah, I mean, offsetting the charging is the number one thing to prevent those peaks, but also offsetting the facility. So when we're seeing this being deployed in a facility that has, to Sam's question, last mile fleet, doing planned routes, planned charging routes, that we have a lot of ability to offset the rest of the facility that we're at's power draw. So we're making their power bills much better. Pushing back to the grid, what we've heard from utilities, and even when you guys did your PLMA conference a couple of years ago in Portland, was I don't want a bunch of just distributed DERs dumping onto our network for a fraction of what we need. I'd rather them just deal with removing as much as possible at the site location, just facility. So charger to facility, vehicle to facility. And the last thing I'll add is all of our chargers, because of our DC-DC converter, are bidirectional with the vehicle, and they are bidirectional with the grid. So there's lots of capability there, but it's just a matter of, we can't just throw these out there and have them be dumping power onto the grid when it's not wanted or warranted. So, Anurag?
Yeah, I think a lot has been said already. I would say it's high time that we gotta make a new term about the battery storage connected to the grid, because V2G means vehicle to grid, right? And we generally are using this term as something which is like a battery connected with the grid is actually dumping power, which is fundamentally different in like all senses. First, technically, the harmonics which can seep from the vehicle to the grid, that is completely different than when a battery connected to the grid is putting energy in. Second is that the vehicle's availability is completely different. When the vehicle is ready to provide power, it's very different than when the battery is ready to provide power connected to the grid, right? So it's just like comparing directly to V2G, there needs to be a better term for this. We need to like coin something new on what exactly these assets mean to the grid. And then Alan, I would disagree with you here because of the size of the battery and what kind of resource it can be, because like our battery size is definitely much bigger. It's 400 kilowatt hours usable. It's even bigger than that. So that is significant resource available for the electrical grid. And again, it's a very dependable resource, right? And we have done a lot of work in optimizing and like just forecasting on the needs of the electrical grid, as well as when exactly the EVs are being charged. It's very site specific, local as well as like a model which works globally. So I kind of disagree that this can't become an asset, but yeah, of course, we start with something, right? Not all utilities are going to let you do a bidirectional connection, and then there is a lot of opportunity to do peak shaving as well. So of course, like let's just start somewhere. But long term, I really think that they can fundamentally make a difference because a lot of charges are required, fast ones too, not just level 2.
Great.
There's
Well,
another question. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
from Sam.
Yeah,
Is that
looks
what
like there's a
you're
bunch of
asking?
them.
So
Yeah,
let me take a
Go
crack
ahead,
crack at Sam's question, because that also goes back to Daniel's question before about this primary depot capacity versus the bridge depot. I think what he was asking, and what kind of like class example for Sam's question here is that for a medium duty truck, which is probably charging overnight level 2 at the primary charging location, if it's going to make, let's say, a trip which is longer than its range, then it will need a secondary depot where it can fill up really quickly for 15 minutes. So I think medium duty is really a great use case where the range of the vehicle is 180 to 200 miles, and they're making a 400-mile cycle. And in that situation, a bridge depot makes sense. And our technologies can do a quick spring up charging, of course, at that bridge depot, which might change. But also, it doesn't need to be a temporary solution. It can be a permanent. I always think of this as a more permanent solution as compared to a quasi-permanent or just temporary one.
Yeah, and Anurag, we get in there with the temporary solution, and then they see the energy savings, they see all this stuff, and then they're like, they can't live without it. So let them call it temporary until they get hooked on it, you know. And to add to that a little bit, and I don't know the term. Again, we should try to figure out a term, but they were talking about, like, someone called it level 2 plus, and it was, we need a charger there that can do overnight charging, and then we need it to have opportunity charging when they come back. And for class 5 trucks like the Rivian and BrightDrop, may they rest in peace, when they leave during the day, they're fully charged, they go on a route, they come back, the routes are extremely predictable, we know exactly down to the kW of exactly what they spend. They come back, if they can do an opportunity charging there at high kW, and then they can finish their day and then come back and charge overnight, they need to have both DC fast charging and overnight charging, and they need to have it equal to the number of trucks, because they all take off at the same time and they all come back at the same time to do opportunity charging. So you can't have a queue. So when they're looking at this, it's, can we have each one of those charging ports be able to do slow overnight and high voltage opportunity charging, rather than a whole string of level 2s and a DC fast charger that they're all waiting in line for. So I think it has huge opportunity for last mile. We're almost out of time.
Yeah.
That was good. I saw Rich come back on. I think that means we're out of time, right?
So I want to thank everyone for this panel for their time and a really great conversation. Thank also the Electric Transportation Interest Group and Megan for bringing this forward, and Megan doing a great job of moderating the Q&A today. I explicitly want to thank Alan, Anurag, Tyler, and Mark for being really informative through this conversation, and thank you for taking the time to share with us. I think the different perspectives of where you guys are in this whole ecosystem, I think was really, really useful. So again, thank you. Otherwise, from PLMA standpoint, the next big thing, as you heard Megan mention earlier, is the spring conference in Indianapolis. It's May 11th through the 13th. We already have over 350 people registered. We're trending towards more than 450. So Tyler, that's even a bigger crowd than we had in Portland a couple of years ago. And and so we're looking forward to a really great conference. Still plenty of time, still hotel rooms available, but time's getting short, right? The 11th is 2 weeks from Monday, so all this is going to come together pretty quickly here. But I look forward to seeing as many of you as possible here in Indianapolis.
Well, I'll be attending, and I'll see you there, Rich.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Tyler.
All right, have a good one.
And for everyone else, thank you so much for taking the time in order to be here today. You've been listening to a Load Management Dialogue presented by PLMA. To learn about upcoming dialogues, visit the PLMA calendar at flexload.org or your favorite podcast platform. This concludes this edition. We'll see you all soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Rich. Bye, everyone.